Audrey Mestre. Audrey Mestre wanted to dive deeper than any human being had ever gone. On October 12, 2002, she descended 561 feet into the Caribbean Sea off the coast of the Dominican Republic, strapped to a weighted sled. She was attempting to break the no limits freediving world record. The concept is simple but terrifying. You take one breath, ride a sled down into the abyss, and at the bottom, you open a valve to fill a lift balloon that rockets you back to the surface. The entire dive should take about 3 minutes. Audrey's took over 8, because when she reached the bottom, the air tank was empty. The balloon didn't inflate. She was 561 feet underwater, alone, with no way up. Bro, that's like being stuck at the bottom of a 50-story building, except the building is made of water and the elevator is broken. She tried to swim. The dive computer data shows her ascending slowly, then stopping around 400 feet. Then she started sinking again. A leaf in autumn pattern, they called it, which basically is a poetic way of saying your brain just quietly clocks out. It's the telltale sign of hypoxic blackout. Her brain was shutting down from lack of oxygen, and her body was drifting back into the darkness. A safety diver named Pascal Bernabé intercepted her around 400 feet and began a desperate ascent, risking his own life from decompression sickness. But by the time Audrey reached the surface, more than 8 minutes had passed. She was pronounced dead at a local hospital. Here's where it gets dark. The dive was organized by her husband, Francisco Pipin Ferreras, a legendary freediver himself. The safety protocols were minimal. There was no redundant lift system. The air tank that was supposed to save her life was never properly checked. Some who were there that day believe it was never filled at all. The official report blamed the empty tank, but in the years since, teammates and investigators have raised disturbing questions. Was it negligence? Was it ego? Pipin was never charged with anything, but the freediving community has never stopped asking. Why was Audrey Mestre, one of the most talented divers in the world, sent to the bottom of the ocean with equipment that didn't work? She was 28 years old. Javad Palizbanian. On August 26, 2005, Iranian stuntman Javad Palizbanian stood in the middle of Tehran's Azadi Stadium in front of hundreds of spectators and live television cameras. He was about to attempt the impossible, jumping his motorcycle over 22 buses lined up side by side. He had done stunts like this before. Just a month earlier, he'd successfully jumped over a 167-foot wide river. This was supposed to be his crowning achievement. Before he climbed onto his bike, he addressed the crowd. "I am going to break the world record," he said, "and do something for my country to be proud of." Then he revved his engine, accelerated toward the ramp, and launched into the air. He didn't make it. The motorcycle came down on the 13th bus, barely past the halfway point. Unlucky number 13 of all the buses to land on. The impact killed him instantly. Iranian state television, which had been broadcasting the stunt live, immediately cut the feed. A newscaster later explained that the crash footage was too disturbing to show publicly. What went wrong? Well, there's no official report. No analysis of the ramp angle, the speed, the wind conditions. The Iranian government controlled the narrative, and they chose silence. All we have are a few wire service reports, all saying the same thing. A 44-year-old daredevil died trying to jump over 22 buses in front of his nation. The whole thing has a tragic, almost theatrical quality. The massive stadium, the patriotic speech, the live broadcast. And then, in an instant, nothing. Just a cut to black and a country left to wonder what they had just witnessed. Javad Palizbanian wanted to make Iran proud. Instead, he became a cautionary tale about the cost of spectacle, broadcast to millions and then erased from the airwaves. Lowell Bayles. In 1931, Lowell Bayles was one of the fastest men alive. He was a test pilot for the Granville brothers, the designers of the infamous GB racing planes, machines built for one purpose: pure, terrifying speed. On December 5, 1931, he climbed into his GB Model Z at Wayne County Airport near Detroit, determined to break the world airspeed record and become the first person to officially fly over 300 miles per hour. He had already come close. A few days earlier, he'd been clocked at 281.9 miles per hour, fast enough to break the existing record, but a timing equipment malfunction invalidated the run. So he went up again. This time, he wanted to leave no doubt. The rules required him to fly at extremely low altitude, no more than 162 feet above the ground, over a measured 3-kilometer course. There was no margin for error, no time to react if something went wrong. And something did. As Bayles screamed across the course at over 300 miles per hour, witnesses saw the right wing suddenly fail. The plane rolled 3 times, dove into the ground, and exploded. Bayles was killed instantly. His body was so badly burned that identification was difficult. What caused the failure? The investigation was inconclusive. Some believe the wing structure couldn't handle the stress. Others think a fuel cap came loose, struck Bayles in the head, and knocked him unconscious, sending the plane into an uncontrollable spin. Either way, the result was the same. The GB was a widowmaker, a plane designed to push the limits of physics. Lowell Bayles found those limits at 300 miles per hour, 50 feet off the ground, with nowhere to go but down. Mohit Kohli. Mohit Kohli was halfway to making history. The 36-year-old Indian ultra-endurance cyclist had set out from Cartagena, Colombia on January 22, 2025, with a single goal: to cycle the entire length of South America, roughly 10,000 kilometers, faster than anyone ever had. The record stood at 41 days and 41 minutes. He was well ahead of pace. For 2.5 weeks, he documented his journey on social media: the Andes, the deserts, the endless roads. His followers in the ultra-cycling community watched his progress with excitement. He was doing it. He was actually going to break the record. On the morning of February 12, 2025, Mohit was cycling through the Atacama Desert in northern Chile, one of the driest and most desolate places on Earth. He was on Route 5, a long, straight highway with minimal shade and fast-moving traffic. At around 8:30 a.m., a minibus struck him. He died at the scene. The local fire chief confirmed that his injuries were so severe that there was nothing anyone could do. Chilean authorities arrested the minibus driver and launched an investigation to determine the exact circumstances of the collision. But for Mohit Kohli, it was over. Thousands of kilometers completed, and then, in a single moment, erased by a vehicle on a desert highway. His brother Mudit later told reporters that Mohit died somewhere in the middle of the desert in Chile. The ultracycling community mourned him as someone who died doing what he loved. But there's something deeply unsettling about this story. He wasn't attempting a dangerous stunt. He wasn't pushing the limits of human physiology. He was just riding a bike on a public road, and a driver hit him. Babar and Suleman. Suleman was 17 years old when he set out to become the youngest person to fly solo around the world in a single-engine aircraft. His father, Babar, a 58-year-old experienced pilot, would accompany him as co-pilot. Together, they planned to cover 26,500 miles in 30 days, raising money for a charity that builds schools in Pakistan. It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime. On June 19, 2014, they took off from Indiana in their Beechcraft Bonanza A36. Over the next month, they flew across Canada, Greenland, Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and Australia. Horace posted updates along the way, writing about risk and purpose. Why did Edmund Hillary climb Mount Everest? He asked. Why did Christopher Columbus discover America? Why did Marco Polo travel to China? On July 22, 2014, they were in American Samoa, preparing for one of the final legs, a night flight to Hawaii. The plane was loaded with extra fuel for the long ocean crossing. A ground crewman noticed the winds were strong and gusty. Babar dismissed the concern. "The weather is great," he said. At 9:58 p.m. local time, they began their takeoff roll. The plane lifted off, but it stayed low. Witnesses described it moving up and down and side to side, struggling to gain altitude. Near the end of the runway, it banked hard to the right and disappeared into the ocean. Horace's body was found hours later, still strapped to his seat, with burns and the smell of fuel. Babar was never found. The NTSB investigation pointed to the heavy fuel load, gusty winds, and marginal climb performance. The plane simply couldn't get airborne. They had raised over $500,000 for charity before the crash. After their deaths, donations surged past $2.5 million. Horace got his legacy. But the question lingers. Was a 17-year-old, no matter how talented, ready for a flight like this? Sometimes, the line between inspiration and tragedy is thinner than we want to believe. Diana Paris. Diana Paris had jumped out of airplanes over 1,500 times. She was a 46-year-old German skydiver, one of the most experienced in the world. On April 2, 2014, she was part of a team of 222 skydivers attempting to set a world record over the Arizona desert. She was the only one who didn't make it home. The setup was massive. 10 aircraft, 222 jumpers. The goal was to build 2 different formations during a single freefall, something that had never been done at this scale. They launched from about 19,500 feet, giving them roughly 80 seconds of freefall to link up, break apart, and link up again before deploying their parachutes. Everything went according to plan until the opening sequence. At around 2,500 to 3,000 feet, Diana's main parachute malfunctioned. The details of what went wrong have never been publicly specified, but what happened next is clear. She cut away her main chute too late. By the time she deployed her reserve, there wasn't enough altitude for it to fully open. Witnesses on the ground saw a partially inflated canopy, then a hard impact in the desert, about half a mile from the landing zone. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The organizers at Skydive Arizona released a statement emphasizing that this wasn't a mid-air collision. No one bumped into her, no one tangled her lines. It was a solo malfunction, the kind that can happen to anyone, even someone with 1,500 jumps. But in big way skydiving, there's an unspoken pressure. You don't want to be the first to break off. You don't want to be the one who opens early and ruins the formation. Some in the community have wondered if that pressure played a role in her decision to wait just a few seconds too long. Those seconds cost her everything.